Well, welcome back to Simple Truth. Hey, finished the last session, leaving you kind of on a cliffhanger because I read it and then realized it was going to take a lot longer for me to do this than I wanted to make this video, right? And God just said, make this into another one, right? So I want you to look with me at verse 3 again in 1 Samuel chapter 23. It says, but David's men said to him, behold, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? I want you to see what happens here. Fear takes over. These men came to David to be under David's command and David's authority. They recognized his command and authority. David put himself under God's command and authority. These men, they're not putting themselves under God's authority. Now we can say yes. They didn't seek David because of his godliness, right? They sought David because of the favor they thought maybe God was going to give them. But they sought David because of who David was. Now you can't make a distinguishment between David, right, and God because they're tight and they're close. Sometimes David winds off a little bit. Right? You get to see David the human versus David the guy who loves God. Right? But a lot of times David and God, they're very tight. And so these men, when they see David, they actually are putting themselves under the authority of God, only they don't necessarily know it. But David goes and David asks God, hey, shall I go up and do this? But none of these other men are part of the process, right? So David comes to the men, and all of a sudden the men say the truth. Hey, we're afraid. We're afraid to go up and do this, right? There is a state of fear on us because of the way we have to live right now. We're not just afraid for us, but we're afraid for our families. All of these guys, many of these guys, not all, had families, right? We learn that from consequent stories, right? There's more here than just a bunch of guys, a bunch of young men following after David. And so David brings the plan to these men, says, hey, let's go, we're going to go, right? And the men balk at it and say, yeah, no, this is not a good idea. This happens all the time in Christianity. I'm sitting and I'm praying and I'm thinking and God teaches and God moves and God says, hey, let's do this. And you bring that in front of a bunch of other people. And at best, they don't get it. They don't understand what you're saying, right? They don't understand what was going on. Why are we doing this? Things are going well. Things are going right. Why are we going to change everything right now? Why are we going in this direction? Why are we taking this sharp left or right? Right? Sometimes there's outright defiance. No, this doesn't make sense to us. Nope, we're not going to do this, Andy. Right? Sometimes people take that which God has given you and they change it. Yeah, no, that's a great idea. It's a fine, great idea. But here's the parameters you're going to do it in. Men are going to order the steps. I've just hammered for 4 weeks now on the fact that God makes the ordering of the steps. We make the plan. God orders the steps. Right? There's a way that seems right to men, but it leads to death, right? And destruction. Like the Bible's super clear about this. Yet almost all the time, godly people are placed between what God has said and what man says. Try going to your boss and saying, God told me I need to leave early. How's that going to go over for you? Try going to your wife and husband and saying, hey, God said we need to do this. I know we were planning to go to Florida for our trip, but we're going to Oklahoma for our trip. Right? Sometimes God does these things and we meet up with resistance. Almost always that resistance is fear. Fear of change, fear of failure, fear of not knowing what's going to happen. Right? People don't like it on a Sunday morning when you change up things. They love coming in and knowing exactly what to expect. Even the Holy Spirit-filled churches have an agenda and they have a plan. We're going to do this, right? We do 40 minutes of worship. Somebody gets up and speaks, and then we have this big time, and then everybody knows what's going to happen. They know the whole plan. At some point, somebody is going to ask us if we want to come up front. At some point, somebody's going to sing 3 songs, right? Then pray. Then a guy's going to preach. Then we're going to have a closing song and a benediction. So like, that's the way it works. So you can pick whatever songs you want to put in there, and you can change up the sermon, but the plan is always the same. We have ordered our steps. How did that start? Well, probably years ago, somebody prayerfully came up with this. And then people are like, well, that's what we got to do. We got to do it all the time, right? These men, they face fear, right? David's telling them what God said. They're looking at the reality around them and they're fearful. And they give some pushback to David, right? Are people giving you pushback? Are you giving people pushback? Are you able to just hear from the Lord and do it? Right? Are you able to support other people in those moments? Right? Think about this. Chew on this for a minute. Right? So we're going to come back next week, continue on this story, see what David does with a little bit of pushback from the plan to go save a village. See you next time.